Oh, maybe. There you go. All right. Take it away, Oscar.
Perfect. Hey there, everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning to those on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those on the East Coast, and to one of our friends here, our guest who's in London. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome back. This is our third installment. We are super, super happy to have special guests here today, filmmakers of the movie The Present. This is a great opportunity to continue the discussion that we've had in our last three series. Common Defense has done on the Israel-Palestine issue and things that are happening in Gaza and things that happen in the West Bank, and just an overall view of what's happening in that area. Just as a quick little brief introduction so you can see everybody on our screens, I'm Oscar Arbul. I'm the Deputy Political Director for Common Defense and United States Marine Corps veteran. And I'll pass it to Jacob for a quick introduction on him.
Yeah, hey everybody. Happy to be here for our third week in a row. Jacob Thomas, you see him pronouns. I am our communications director here at Common Defense. 8-year United States Air Force veteran, originally from Georgia, now living out and based in Minneapolis. And I'll let Farah go next. Or I don't know, Oscar, I'll let you figure out how you're doing the rest of the day. Yeah.
Quick little introduction of yourself as our guest here.
Okay, I'm Farah Nabulsi. I'm a British Palestinian filmmaker who co-wrote and directed and produced the film, The Present, that we all gathered here today to discuss a little bit about.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Farah. And Dr. Malas, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Mohamed Malas. I'm a real estate investor in Southern California. I took a kind of like a midlife change in terms of addressing filmmaking, and it's a blessing that I've actually connected with Farah and was able to support a film that has got Oscar nominations, and kind of this has been a passion of mine for the past 4 or 5 years.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, folks, the topic of today is the film, The Present, and we have some of the filmmakers here. I'm going to kick it to Jacob for a little bit of recap on what we've been and what we've done so far on our series here on Israel-Palestine. Jacob, floor is yours.
Yeah. So like a kind of brief overview of Common Defense and who we are, how we've been here if you're just now joining us. Common Defense has been around for right at just over 5 years now as an official organization, but we've been doing work since about 2016 around a lot of different issues, and in particular a lot of us came out of the anti-war movement here in the US, protesting against America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and through that work we had a very large campaign in 2019-2020 called Ending the Forever War Campaign, to help end the war in Afghanistan, the longest war that the U.S. has ever had, 20 years. We, are very excited that was a successful campaign to end that, and that we are no longer in that war. But through that work, we also got connected with a lot of Israeli veterans doing the same work, right? Who saw the work that we were doing in Afghanistan, trying to end America's occupation there, and said, hey, we're Israeli veterans that have been doing the same type of work, trying to end the occupation here in the occupied territories in the West Bank and in Gaza. And so we've been doing that work. And of course, over the past year, and particularly the last 6 months, that work has changed a lot with what has been happening with Israel's assault in Gaza. And then, of course, the attacks on October 7th. And so we've been doing more of that work and been building out our ceasefire platform, and through that work trying to do that education piece with our fellow veterans, with our community members, and those affected by militarism and by war. We have had now, this is our third series, our third live stream. Week 1, we worked with Breaking the Silence to talk about kind of rules of engagement and different ways that the IDF operates and how that differs, or in some cases is the same as how the US military has operated in the past. And then last week, we were able to meet with Palestinian peace activists, as well as other members of Breaking the Silence, to have a further discussion about movement and the restrictions of movement within the West Bank and the occupied territories, And so I think that kind of gave us a really good grounding in having this discussion today. And I will just say, for housekeeping purposes, we will have, like I said, that ceasefire that we've been working on should be popped up right there. So commondefense.us/ceasefire-2024. If you are a veteran or a civilian member who supports the ceasefire, a military family member, we urge you to sign on to that, with the 4 pillars there being a release of the hostages, reinstatement of UNRWA funding to help with humanitarian crisis that is going on, and then of course an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and the conditioning of military aid to Israel. At this point, I think it's obvious that they need that. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Oscar.
Amazing. Thank you, Jacob. All right, folks. So I'm going to discuss a little bit of why we're here, kind of. So on top of what Jacob was saying about the work that we're trying to do, right, the anti-war work that the Common Defense is doing, I and all of us, when we were coming together trying to figure out how we can do this on a virtual setting, what can we do what can yield the biggest impact? I thought, hey, from an artistic point of view, we need the artistic point of view, because that message translates a little bit different. It can resonate a little bit more. We've the last 2 conversations that we've had were pretty heavy. Hearing, stories within Gaza from IDF members can be very, it's alarming. Some of the things that we've heard, and so to bring a different spin and to bring a different perspective and delivery, I thought, hey, why don't we do a film? And it was about last year that I was introduced to the film, The Present, which is a short film that we will get into here. And it just resonated with me because it took all the things that we've known or we know of, which is the separation between Palestinians and Israelis from the West Bank to Israel and in Gaza, and the control of movement. And here in this film gives just an example of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. We might think sometimes, as former veterans, as a huge, here's this mission, this is what we have to do, this is the logistics of it all, this is what happens, start to finish. But here's something that consistently happens all the time. In our last discussion, we were talking to an individual who was in the West Bank, and they were talking about how roads were closed, and they can't take that road anymore. And imagine that in your daily commute, where your highway or your road that you usually take is just now no longer available to you. This film kind of goes into that, and it goes into the control of movement itself. I think that it's a perfect way to discuss what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to play a little bit of the trailer. Jacob, if we're set up with that, perfect. I'm going to use the Safari.
Yeah, once you start sharing, I can pull it over.
Perfect. Excellent. I'm going to share a little trailer of the film so that we can get a little of a synopsis of it, a little clip of it, and then we will get into our conversation. So let me hit present, share, and what I'm going to do is this window. All right, Jacob, let me know if you got that.
All right.
Excellent. I'm going to hit play.
Present down. I need toilet paper, lemons. What do you have here? Security chief, move now! أحلى بنت في فلسطين. What do you want? Have a system here. My house is just there. طيب ولا شيء، مش مشكلة، بنحل. يلا نمشي.
Okay, perfect. And folks, that is the trailer for the film that we're going to be discussing. I have the great pleasure to introduce an executive producer and the director of the film. Can folks hear me? Just to make sure that my microphone is on. Excellent. Good. All right. So first, Farah Nabulsi. I'm going to do a quick little introduction. Farah Nabulsi is an Oscar-nominated and BAFTA award-winning Palestinian British filmmaker and human rights advocate. She has written, directed, and produced short fiction films exploring topics that matter to her. Farah has spoken and screened her work internationally at film festivals, universities, and the United Nations. Her short film, The Present, underscores the importance of freedom of movement as a basic human right for Palestinians. The Present received over 50 audience and jury awards at top-tier international film festivals, a BAFTA award for Best British Short Film, and an Academy Award nomination for Best Live Action Short at the Oscars. It was licensed internationally, including at Canal and Netflix worldwide. Farah's most recent work, The Teacher, had its world premiere in official selection at Toronto International Film Festival in 2023 and marks her feature-length film directorial debut. The multi-award winning film star, well-known Palestinian actors Salah Bakri and British actress, who I'm gonna unfortunately butcher that name. Farah, can you jump in and
Imogen Poots.
There we go. Farah has been invited to serve as a jury member at numerous festivals and as a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Here's a great resource, actually, folks. One of the first amazing things that she was telling us backstage that we want to share with you. She uses the power of storytelling, her social media and online platform, oceansofinjustice.com, to share the Palestinian experience with Western audience. Jacob, I don't know if perfect. Excellent. Folks, if you can, before we kick off, please copy that link, type it down, refer to it later. And I'll let Farah take the microphone from here on out and speak about her work and this, as well as this website. Farah, please.
So is this where you would like me to talk about coming into filmmaking, or?
Please. Yes, an introduction to your career, everything you've done to the point, and and maybe a little bit about the website you have as well.
Sure. Well, thank you all of you for arranging this, and it's my pleasure and my honor to be able to speak with you all today. So I am born and raised and educated in the UK, in London, my whole life, but my blood, my heritage is Palestinian. I'm 100% Arab and Palestinian, and I had actually been to Palestine a number of times as a child. And then for around 25 years, nothing. And I go to Palestine for the first time as an adult around 10 years ago. And despite knowing very much what has been taking place on the ground there for decades, having read the books and watched the news and being quite informed, I would say, there was nothing that could prepare me for witnessing with my own two eyes the discrimination and the injustice and the oppression that is taking place on the ground with my own two eyes. And so really, without taking too long, I would say that initial trip and the trips that then followed changed me. And so by way of background, actually, my background is very much I was an investment banker, and I had a very different life, as it were. And going back to my sort of life of privilege did not make sense to me anymore. I felt deeply compelled to tell these human stories about Palestinians that I had come across and met and discussed their reality, and really express myself creatively as well. And so while I had been writing therapeutically about what I had seen and felt and began to imagine as I experienced empathy, I eventually kind of realized that despite having all the sort of facts and figures and truths and proofs and international law and UN resolutions, which are very important, please don't get me wrong, but despite all of that, what was the most important element of the equation is empathy, is speaking to people's hearts. And so I decided to, initially, having no background in filmmaking, I didn't go to film school, I have no formal background in film, was to adapt those initial writings into short films. And so my first few short films are more abstract and experimental and tone poem than The Present, the film that you've just seen the trailer of, and I believe some of your viewers have seen or will see the full 24-minute short film. So those were my initial short films. And then at that point, I realized I had the bug. That from a personal level, I want to express myself creatively. I enjoy the filmmaking process. I'm getting to know myself as a human being, as a Palestinian, and as a filmmaker more. But also, I'm telling the Palestinian story, and that's where it led me to The Present, this particular film, which, just as a quick, background of inspiration, the seed inspiration for this film was when I was in Palestine with a friend of mine, a young man I got to know over the years, and we were standing on one side of a checkpoint that's very similar to the one in the film. And he lives in a road where literally when he steps out of his house, to the right, there's a painted mark on the road. And he's not actually allowed to walk down that road because he's a Palestinian, despite his home being on this road where he was born and raised, and his mother and father. And then to the left, about 100 meters, 200 meters down, is a checkpoint, an Israeli checkpoint. And so no matter where he has to go, who he wants to see, what he wants to do, he has to go through this checkpoint every single day, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. And so I despite being through checkpoints myself, witnessing Palestinians at these checkpoints, that particular moment where I was asking him about his own experiences, the inspiration for The Present came. Anyway, I detract a little. And so since then, The Present, and then, as mentioned, The Teacher, which is my feature-length directorial film, which I wrote and directed, and also was one of the producers. And here we are.
Amazing. Thank you, Farah. I appreciate that. And folks, if you haven't seen either film, I think Jacob's going to have it on the ticker, or we will post it a little bit later for links of The Present and also The Teacher as well. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mallis, who is the executive producer of The Present. And Dr. Mallis, I'll go ahead and give you the microphone.
Sure. Thanks, Oscar. Appreciate you again having us here and giving us the opportunity to share The Present and The Teacher that Farah just done, which I was engaged with in both films and proud to have been so. In fact, I had seen that what you referred to, the oceans of injustice. It was one of the points where I just told Farah, my God, I love your. She has never done movies before. She said she was an investment banker. Seeing that work, understanding what she's done. And in fact, that's how we met. We met in a visit to Palestine. We were with a group. And whereas we would go and spend time and wait the next morning to do some more sightseeing and seeing around, her husband tells us that when they go to bed that night, she would actually sit there crying in tears, and she gets her journal out and writes these emotions that she was going through. As she said earlier, she just hadn't visited for 25 years. And to come and to see these are my people, the oppression, the people, the injustice that they're living under. And so it was like a very passionate experience that made her. It's all her emotions that you see on the screen when you see the oceans of injustice. So when she did this amazing work and got the recognition of winning a BAFTA and getting an Oscar nomination, in fact, that film, again, I realized its importance when I found an article in the New York Times written by an op-ed by CIA Director John Brennan, saying the title was "Mr. President, you should watch this movie." It made me realize how impactful the work can be. And this is why it's gonna find it important to support filmmakers, storytellers, because, and I'm borrowing this expression from something I heard from Farah, there's an old African proverb that says, the hunter will always be glorified until such time that the lion can speak or write. And I think that's so true. If
Okay, well, until the lion learns how to speak, the story will always be glorified by the hunter.
Absolutely, I stand corrected. I quoted you on it. So, and the point here is, until Palestinians wake up, and because there's so much misinformation, especially in the film world, Hollywood is so geared in one direction, and it's basically that's the story you hear all the time. And it is a story of injustice, and the story of the Holocaust, and the story of the pain that has happened. But unfortunately, 75 years later, much of that, there's a new country established, a new Israel. The Jewish people have a homeland. Unfortunately, it's the Palestinians that are continued to be the victims of the Holocaust, because we remain, they're being killed with impunity. The world doesn't even look. And this is their land. Who are the people in Gaza? They're the people that used to live in Jaffa and Tel Aviv, and who've been pushed into this little enclave, and now they become, free game to and sorry, I'm just sidetracking, but to me, to say 4 hostages were saved, and then 276 people were killed in the process. I mean, my God, is that the price you pay instead of negotiating for people just to go kill, kill, kill? And this is like the highest rate of killing in the 21st century, where you have almost 45 to 50,000 people killed in the span of about 7-8 months. So anyway, sorry, I sidetracked as well, but you can tell there's the importance of supporting filmmakers, and that's what I found is my role in supporting such talented people like Farah.
Thank you, Dr. Malas. No, and your sidetrack is actually well received. It's unfortunately a current thing that's happening, and I think it speaks to the point that we're all here discussing, is the unfortunately disregard of the human life, of the Palestinian life, and what's happening now. And here we see one, right, of control in this movie. Folks, can I ask how you both exactly met and to work on this actual film? Dr. Malas?
Sure. As I say, we were following that trip to Palestine that we experienced. We stayed in touch. I had watched Oceans of Injustice. I happened to serve on the board of trustees of a university, and I said, we really need to see this work. And Farah had done, I think she's done 3. There was They Took My Son. She did another one, Oceans of Injustice, and the third one, Farah, what was the third?
So it's Nightmare of Gaza, Oceans of Injustice, Nightmare of Gaza, and Today They Took My Son. So these are 3 short films prior to the present. And so, yeah, Mohanad had said, let's try get these in front of some students, universities. I was already also touring at universities around the world. And so, that's how we continued with our connection.
Correct. And then came the present, and then following that is now The Teacher, which launched at the Toronto Film Festival in September. And Farah has been actually doing the festival tour, winning 12 accolades in various. And the film has been a big hit in the Middle East. And Farah will be here in following up with the agents in the United States, the UK, and in Europe soon.
Awesome. Perfect. Great. So my next question for both of you is, before we get into the actual film, is I wanted to get your perspective and what this film means to either of you. And I'll kick it to Farah first on what it means to you for the movement. As we were talking about, right, there's this is not just a fictional film, but this is something that is based in reality. And I wanted to know, in the overall strategy, right, Farah, in the different avenues and possibilities that we can do to bring justice, what does this film mean for the movement for Palestinians?
You know, Oscar, I think it's not so much like I say this film. I just think, you know, from my perspective, my work, my films, and then, you know, beyond, all films. You know, one of the things I realized as I was tearing my hair out for about 2 years before I chose to become a filmmaker was that we know, you know, throughout history, that any colonizer throughout history works very, very hard on dehumanizing the indigenous population that they are colonizing, and then branding them as barbarians, as terrorists, and then eventually denying that they ever existed. And we know that they do this for sort of internal, external consumption so that people of goodwill will not feel with that indigenous population. And then any and all atrocities can be carried out against that population with no recourse. In fact, what's happening in Gaza and the genocide in Gaza right now is a perfect example of that. And what's been happening to Palestinians for the last 7 decades is a perfect example. It's not just, you know, settler colonization, all colonizers. And so for me, the art of film, the art of cinema, which really has the power to sort of transcend borders and overcome stereotypes and misconceptions and misperceptions, and essentially speak to the heart, which means reverse that dehumanization ultimately. You know, to me, cinema and film, and so therefore my work or my films, really play a huge role in almost the lead advocacy, if you like, in the process. Because you can have all these other elements of advocacy, and I mentioned at the beginning, and all the truths and proofs and facts and maps and all of that. But unless people feel with those on the receiving end of that oppression and that discrimination and that colonization and those control systems and that abuse and so forth, then it all gets to carry on business as usual. So it means the world to me. It's my resistance. It's my struggle. It's what I can do with my, you know, skills and my heart and my capabilities to contribute to bringing that to an end, where we can see everybody, you know, free and equal and living their lives with dignity. Because this film, The Present, more than this idea of control systems, and it's really at its essence about human dignity. That's what The Present is really about, human dignity. And we all deserve to live with human dignity. So that's what it all means to me.
Yeah. I love that so much, Farah. And I know we had talked kind of at the start when we were doing our prep for this, and I think it reminds me of, so my degree is in art and theater as well. I went to the University of Minnesota here after I got out of the military and studied art and political movements. So particularly looking at the queer movements here in the US, but you know, because I was fascinated by that exact piece of how art and movies and film, how it touches a different part of us. And I think we found that, you know, both, especially over the last 6 months, but I think one thing that we've always kind of figured out as we've been doing this work and other human rights work, LGBTQ work, whatever it might be, that the facts and figures don't really change a lot of hearts and minds, right? We can come in with our facts and say, here's all the data, here's the pieces, but it isn't until someone actually meets someone and says, oh, you went through this, and I can hear from you what that was. And for me, it was, you know, I started doing this advocacy work because I did a arts workshop with Combatants for Peace at the University of Minnesota. Helen came and taught us here, and that was when I kind of really understood this work back, you know, a decade ago now. As a little, you know, young 20-year-old getting out of the military, being like, I don't know what's going on. But it was in that moment of seeing and being able to do that work that it became much more real. And so I think that the art in this space is so important. So thank you.
And there is another element which I think is partially funny but so real, and I give it through like a story here. I was going for a walk with a friend, and we were talking about, and there was a church called the Church with the Iron Mask, and this is kind of a story. It's a real story about the king in France who I can't remember whether they were twins or two brothers, and they wanted one to become the king and not the other, so they took the brother and put an iron mask on his face and jailed him. In fact, this is like, you know, a historic fact in French history. And I was talking to my friend, and I'm saying, I wonder, was he like a twin brother, or was he like another brother? And there's this American lady walking next to us, and this was overseas, actually, it was in France. And the American lady says, "Oh, no, he was the younger brother." And I said, "Oh, you know, must be a historian or something." She says, "No, I saw the movie." And that made me recognize the power of the movie. In fact, if you go anywhere in Europe or anywhere in the world, if that matters, if you listen to the radio or watch any TV station at night or whatever, it's always American pop music that is playing. It's always the movies that you see at night. They're always there's a lot. Indians do a lot of movies. Africa does a lot of movies. There's a lot of production out there. Everybody wants to watch American movies. And the power of our American movies and Hollywood in the world is unbelievable. And people, when they see a film, that become the fact in their mind. It's forget history. I mean, now we become just, oh, I saw the film, then that is true. That is real. So there is something to be said about the power of filmmaking and the power.
Well, I mean, sorry, just to interrupt you, Hollywood is the perfect example of how Arabs and Muslims have been portrayed in cinema, and Palestinians. Even the concept of the kufiya, it's always the barbarian, the terrorist, or, you know, wearing a kufiya, and therefore has shifted the sort of mindset of just average Joe sort of associating what that is. And literally that has been through Hollywood cinema. So, but just to add to your point, Jacob, you know, there's cinema of resistance as well, which played such a powerful role in bringing down apartheid South Africa, which, you know, is even studied at universities to this day and so forth. So it really, there is something very powerful, and studies have actually shown that even if you show people actual factual proof that contradicts something they've repeatedly been told or made to believe, not only do people stick to their beliefs, sometimes they become even more entrenched in their beliefs. But the same studies have shown if you can address them through their hearts, through empathy, that's when they consider, you know, reconsidering or moving away from their original positions or changing their minds. So actual studies have shown this. So, yeah.
It sounds like a lesson that some of our diplomats should be able to take, right? The use of love instead of leading with love, instead of leading with you know, arms and strength. Unfortunately,
Well, I think, yeah, and I think, I mean, that's exactly the work that we have to do here, right? Is that space, because before, you know, like I very much agree, right, that Palestinians and, you know, kafiyas and like the styling has been this kind of scapegoat for a lot of, you know, or shorthand for barbarian, for, you know, the bad guy in the film. And before it was that, you know, like we had the Hays Code where LGBTQ people were always the villain and couldn't have any good stories, and you couldn't see them like in any good light, you know, and eventually that broke in media. But it took people saying, no, this isn't okay, and or telling their own stories and getting them out there somehow, for Hollywood and for other producers to kind of take notice. And that work, I mean, this is part of that work, that intentionality behind this, to show that human face. You know, it's Pride Month and we have Harvey Milk, right, who is, you know, telling people to come out, right? Like if people know you, if they see you, if, you know, for us, it was coming out to your friends and families and your neighbors as gay. And for plenty of other people, it's like, hey, like, you know, a Palestinian, you know, somebody who is affected by this war and by this destruction, by this harm. And when we can show that, you can say, oh, well, my butcher down the street, oh, he's Palestinian, and oh, he lost family. Now it puts it into a context for me to say, oh yeah, now it's real. And it's awful that humans sometimes take that moment to get there. But when we know that is the case, how can we not share those stories and get them out there?
Yeah.
And I want to know, I know one of the other questions we had kind of was walking through, and maybe just y'all can kind of popcorn back and forth. But when y'all were, you know, filming the present, you know, obviously it takes place, you know, mostly at the checkpoint and in these, but can we talk a little bit more about kind of some of that production summary, about the film, you know, kind of like maybe how long it took, right? The location, kind of different restrictions that were in place. How was, you know, even doing this possible?
Yeah, I mean, so when, you know, I can speak about this actually for a very long time, so I won't go on too long. But you know, and I would say all my experiences of shooting on the ground. So The Present, as you know, is a short film, 24 minutes. So I was on the ground for a shorter period of time. The Teacher, which is a feature-length film, I was on the ground for at least 3 months, so much longer, and far more trips before that for casting, for location scouting, and. So I'll speak to it in just one.
And to be 100% clear, folks know that this was shot in the West Bank.
Yes, exactly. So basically, whatever I'm saying now kind of would maybe be with regards to either film, as it were. So, you know, shooting independent cinema is extremely difficult anywhere you are in the world. So anyone who's a filmmaker would know, like, oh, it's tough no matter where you are. So usually you'd want to sort of choose the path of least resistance. But I did feel very, very strongly about shooting on the ground in the West Bank because I could. I was going to for various reasons. One of which, of course, is the authenticity of it, the topography, even working with the local community, the Palestinians, whether it's the accents of some of the actors, or, you know, so many different reasons, investing in the community and so forth. But now you have military occupation and settler colonization and apartheid to contend with, as you're trying to make this film that's already difficult when it comes to locations and finances and so forth. And so it wasn't easy. It's never easy. And I'd say, while there are the practical, logistical, pragmatic problems of shooting in such territory, like, yes, Israeli checkpoints or military roadblocks, supposed to have 1 day off and then everyone's stuck 3 days because they can't get back. I could talk about that. I think those are things I kind of expected and that you struggle with and you deal with. What I didn't really think about and became the biggest challenges was the sort of mental, emotional toll. In the sense that, yes, these are fiction films, these are fiction narrative films, but they are extremely rooted in reality. And they are not period films. They're not, you know, about something that took place a long time ago and here we are reenacting them. No, this is the Palestinian reality now and today. In fact, it's gotten worse since I've shot both these films, as you know, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank. So, you know, the element of control systems and checkpoints when it comes to the present, it's never been worse than it is today in the West Bank right now. In terms of human dignity, it's never been worse. When it comes to the film The Teacher, where we have the idea of settler vandalism and violence, the illegal Israeli settlers in the West Bank, well, it was at an all-time high prior to October 7th. Since then, it's increased exponentially. Now, that's a feature that's in The Teacher, the film The Teacher, this settler violence and vandalism. But while we're shooting this film, as an example, that vandalism and violence was taking place. So an example is when illegal settlers, they descend on Palestinian olive groves and they torch the trees and the olive groves and uproot them or torch them. And while we were shooting The Teacher, as an example, in a very nearby village where my protagonist in the film is actually from, they, in real life, settlers had descended and started to torch the olive groves. And there's a scene in the film where that is depicted. So you can now just imagine the sort of, I don't know, I was going to swear. So, it's pretty overwhelming. Or another
I'll say you're among veterans, so we're really bad at doing it too. So
Okay.
don't worry.
It's a mind. Another example is in the film, a family, their home is demolished. While I was on my way to work one day, actually, I passed by a couple and their 6 children whose home had recently been demolished, meaning 3 hours earlier, and they were standing in front of the rubble of their freshly demolished homes. So it's overwhelming. And at one point, actually, while we were shooting, they started dropping bombs on Gaza. Nothing compared to what's happening today, but in that moment, very heightened tensions in the West Bank. It's overwhelming. You're trying to stay positive. You're trying to finish a film. People are concerned for their safety. You've brought people from abroad as well, whether it's cast or crew. And the people working with you on the film, this is their world. This is their reality. So an example for the present is there's a scene where there's a number of soldiers. Now, these are all Palestinian actors acting as their oppressor in real life. And there's a female soldier in the film. And actually 2 weeks after we had wrapped, she sent me a video that she was videoing in her house, kind of, as Israeli soldiers actually entered her home and took her brother, her younger brother, who was 16, away in the middle of the night. So it's just so close to home. And interestingly enough, for those who do watch the film, the first scene in the film is a different checkpoint to the one that you saw in the trailer. And that's a real checkpoint. It's an infamous checkpoint called Checkpoint 300 that we shot. I felt strongly about shooting. We did it kind of guerrilla style. We did it during our preparation period, not during the shooting period, just in case, we got stopped. We had a whole story about what we would say if we were stopped. We knew where the military were. They were around the corner. It's an industrial checkpoint. And actually everybody in that scene are real Palestinians going to work at 3, 4 in the morning in what can only be described as like a battery farm for chickens and poultry. It's so inhumane. So when I talk again about human dignity, so that was a very tough scene to shoot and very guerrilla style. And so there's so many, I could keep going with the stories. So in the West Bank, it's never easy. And sometimes you have to do things a bit undercover, because who are you going to ask permission from? You can, if you're shooting in areas A, which is, Palestinian areas, which the Israeli military can come into at any time. But the Israeli military have chopped up the West Bank into areas A, B, and C. And we try to avoid areas B and C, but the checkpoint I just mentioned, for example, is not considered an area A. And so I refuse to take permission from the occupier. It's illegal in and of itself. So who are you going to go ask? Hey, can I have permission to shoot your illegality? Can you make it legal for me to shoot your... So sometimes you have to go a little bit into that guerrilla filmmaking zone, but otherwise we try to do it in the most practical way possible. Anyway, I've gone on and on, but hopefully that gives you an idea.
No, absolutely.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jacob.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that was perfect. I know you have a clip pulled up for us.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're ready for that or not yet, but
yeah, I just wanted to say one quick thing, Farah. So from what our discussion was in the last iteration of what we did here with Breaking the Silence and talking about the control of movement, this is exactly it. There's military presence in a place there shouldn't be military presence, with military authority that isn't necessarily the authority. But still, nonetheless, there is this presence, right? And this constant presence is the intention, is to have the constant presence, to have the constant fear, the intimidation, etc. And here we are in the last discussion about just movement. And here we are, you and Dr. Malas shooting a film, and the exact same thing is still there. It doesn't escape anything or anyone, and that's just, it's horrendous.
And there's no recourse for it either, because when the only people, like when the bad actors are the military, they're also the tribunal, they're also the judge, they're also the jury, right? There's no other way to for regress, to actually say, hey, this thing happened, like the settlers attack you, you know, in theory would call the IDF, but we know that that's not a viable option either.
If anything, they're providing support and they're actually aiding and abetting that process.
Yeah, at worst, at best, looking the other way. At worst, actively helping the violence continue.
I'd say, I mean, the system is entirely, of course, rigged, because again, it's a settler colonial enterprise. And some people will say to you, even watching the present, they'll be like, yes, but these checkpoints, aren't they for security? And you just think, okay, these are checkpoints all across the West Bank between Palestinian homes and villages and towns. They have absolutely nothing to do with security, unless we're talking about whose security? Oh, the security of the illegal Israeli settlers that are also all over the West Bank, that are completely illegal in international law and in just human law, you know, the laws of ethics, as it were. So it's these checkpoints. It's like you said, Oscar. They are there to humiliate, to frustrate, to push Palestinians essentially off their lands. If you can look at anything and everything Palestine-Israel related through the lens of really understanding that original sin, as it were, the settler colonial enterprise that begun in 1948 in terms of the mass expulsion of over 750,000 men, women, children, babies from their homes and their lands, and a massive ethnic cleansing, and all the violence that came with that. And you realize that process never ended. So here today, when you think about settler violence and vandalism, when you think about home demolitions, when you think about military violence, when you think about checkpoints, remember that lens of what a settler colonial movement is about: acquiring as much land as possible, ridding it of as much of the indigenous population as possible, or pushing them into these Bantustans and enclaves. Then you start to recognize every element, their sordid hat of tricks, if you like. You know, that's now you'll understand every element, and you'd no longer be confused by any of it. You say, it's not complex. This is the process.
And if I may add, sorry, I don't want to show the clip, but this is meaningful to say now. That word, there's the statement from the river to the sea is almost, oh my God, the Palestinians want to eliminate all the Jewish people from here, and this is viewed as anti-Semitic. I mean, literally, this is what is being phrased out there. If you look at the Likud party, which is the Netanyahu government, if you look at their charter is from the river to the sea, Jewish people only, which is what Shara was talking about. This was the settler colonial project. That was the program, that was the intent started for it, and continues still today with the settler violence.
You know, Mohammed, it's not just the Likud party. Every government in the history of Israel, their charter has included that. So,
okay.
That was their.
Yeah, for folks to have the context, yes, that was a charter for the Likud party, I believe, in the early 80s that carried on, right?
Right.
And so thanks for referencing that, because there is an important, right, that there's I think in this space sometimes not wanting to be trapped by certain conversations, but there's an important one, right, that that needs to be distinguished sometimes, that hey, there's more context to this and this needs to be discussed, and we thank you both for bringing that up, because that's
and also, I mean, I'm sure many people know that, but the whole idea of the river to the sea is to say there are Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship who are, you know, subjected to over 50 discriminatory laws within Israel. Then you've got the Palestinians in Gaza, you've got the Palestinians in Jerusalem, you've got the Palestinians in the West Bank. So Palestinians are all over that entire geographical territory. And so when they say from the river to the sea, I don't think it's for anyone else to tell a Palestinian what they mean by that. They mean freedom, equality, justice for every Palestinian that lives and exists anywhere geographically on that piece of land. That's all that means. But it gets hijacked, like all our narratives seem to be, which is why it's important to tell stories like this.
Thank you for that, both.
I think with that, let's pull up this clip. I know we're
running a little late on.
Want to discuss,
just to give it a quick little intro. This is a scene in the movie that I thought was super impactful because of how innocent it can be, and this could be any family or any father So Yusuf is the main character and his daughter Yasmin, and you'll see here in a second what happens. This can be any scenario anywhere, but what happens here, I think what her final statement is here is what kind of hits hard and what kind of exemplifies exactly what we're talking about. Farah was saying with her example, why this, when she was inspired, a gentleman couldn't walk out of his house and turn right. This control, and here's the evidence of it. I'm going to present it here in a second.
Yeah, and as you're pulling that up, I mean, yeah, it's when that whole piece, Farah, when you were talking about being in the village, when I was there on the delegation with Breaking the Silence a couple of years ago, that same thing happened. We met with a Palestinian family in the South Hebron Hills who were like, oh yes, we had a fence and like kind of area here for our animals, for our goats, and it was destroyed like yesterday before you got here. And we're still meeting with this family who is like, had this entire vandalism happen, and there was like, yeah, it is what it, like, there was no shock and awe from them. And then to just be in that moment, for that to just be so normal that, yeah, the fence we put up, now it's gone. And like, if we want to build another one, we have to get a permit, which we're not going to be able to get because the IDF controls the permits. Yeah. So if we put up a new fence, then they will come tear it down as the government because we didn't have the permit to put it up, even though it was taken down by settlers. And yeah, looks like the clip is ready.
Yep. And I will start it. Oh, and folks, this is right after they leave one of the checkpoints and they're finished going to the first checkpoint on their way into town to buy an actual gift.
يلا ياسمين يلا بابا بدنا نمشي شو صار حبيبة قلبي ماما آسف بابا آسف ما انتبهتش
بس في كتير بابا ما قدرت أتحمل
حبيبتي بابا حبيبتي ليه ما حكيتي لي من قبل حبيبتي
خلص بابا ما كان بإيدك تعمل شي
طيب بابا طيب ولا إشي مش مشكلة بتنحل يلا نمشي
Thanks, Jacob, for sharing that. And yeah, what's happened before that scene is that there was a checkpoint that unfortunately, so the actors are going into, or the characters are going into town to buy a present, simply buy a present, and to go into the checkpoint, the father and daughter have to go through it. As you saw in the trailer, the father is questioned and time goes on, right? He is detained momentarily there, not even momentarily, for X amount of time. And unfortunately, the daughter couldn't hold it while she was waiting for her father to be released. And if, for folks who might be watching this on a mobile, if you can't see the actual detail on the screen, the young girl unfortunately wet her pants. Farah, what can you explain this scene? And again, super impactful to me because it could be a day-to-day thing, but this is something at the end where she says there was nothing you can do. Can you please explain this scene and how it came about?
So actually, congratulations to you. Didn't you have a child just recently, right? Congratulations. I didn't get to say anything earlier.
Well, I appreciate that, Farah.
Right. Well, I'm a mother of 5 and 5 kids. 3 I birthed, 2 I didn't, in case you're all going, but yes, I have 5 children, and it's not just about being a parent with a child. It's about recognizing that, first of all, when Palestinians are living in what is this environment of military occupation, of apartheid, of colonization, that doesn't mean their normal day-to-day issues in life just disappear and that's all they're dealing with. No, they deal with the entire rat race of life that we all do, and then those massive crimes against humanity, And so what was important to me with this film was, if we're going to create that landscape that is real and true, and in this case, it's a man with his daughter, then I don't know who can relate to this, but the number of times I've been out with one of my kids and it's like, oh, I need the bathroom, and you just do the natural thing. Oh, let's pop into this cafe and, use their bathroom, or let's hail a cab and get you home quickly, or, so this idea of a child needing the toilet should just be something very straightforward and easy to deal with. The same way other elements in the film that you haven't shown, but in the film, Yusuf, our protagonist, he suffers from back pain, and you see him taking a painkiller and he forgets his painkillers. Now, again, these are things in life that any one of us can relate to and can go through. And so, I could, for me, him and his daughter in this scenario of being held up for a number of hours, and not only as a parent feeling impotent to be able to protect your child, and this is the case for Palestinians at these checkpoints, the children are witnessing their parents in their superhero mothers and fathers, their grandparents, their brothers and sisters, being not just dehumanized, but literally that humiliated, and that their parents are in no position to protect them. And so these children, they grow up very fast, and they recognize and witness these things. And so actually that line that she says, don't worry, there was nothing you could do. I mean, those words for any parent to hear from their child, that there was nothing that parent could do. That's what we live for, to protect our children in some way or another, right? And when we can't, we blame ourselves, even if it's not our fault. Those are very painful words, and yet they are true. For a Palestinian parent in such a scenario and living in Palestine in these moments, there is nothing they can do. Or eventually they can lash out in some kind of violence to protect their children, to protect themselves. I don't know. So it's me having witnessed children at these checkpoints watch their parents be humiliated, and also recognizing just from a practical point of view. And so the child is humiliated as well. I mean, to be able to sit there and realize she can't even ask, I need the bathroom, or, mom, dad, help me, and to just sit there and wet her pads. So the children are also humiliated. And so it's a whole kind of range of things. But as a parent, I know that that's probably why that scene really hit home.
Thank you, Farah. Yes, and that's exactly it, right? You just said it. It's a daily, and it's a relationship that's just being stripped instantly and constantly, not even in just one instant, right? We see this in one instance in a film, but this constantly happens how many times a day, how many times a week, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to kick it to Jacob to start rounding us out. We just noticed having this great conversation. We've just noticed that we're getting close to the hour mark, and we want to make sure that we close out on time. Go ahead, Jacob.
Also, just I selfishly need to end it before I start crying. So this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you all both so much for joining us. I do want to kind of highlight some of the other work that we're doing for anybody watching who wants to get involved. I'm going to try and put up the links to the different trailers as well. But before we get there, or while I'm working on those, I wanted to show that ceasefire again. So we have been, for the past 6 months or so, we've had a ceasefire. We did a renewed petition that kind of clarified the different pieces and added in the reinstatement of UNRWA funding once that was pulled out earlier this spring. So if you, a veteran, civilian, supporter, military family member, doesn't matter, anyone can sign this petition. It'll ask some of those questions. And if you are a veteran or current U.S. military member, we would also, fully encourage you to sign on and note that you are a veteran or active duty member, so that we can help kind of calculate that as well, and show that we are planning to deliver these, I think, here very shortly. As we've been collecting more and more signatures, we've kind of already done some work with different elected officials and, putting this out there, letting them know, but we want to do that delivery as well. So commondefense.us/ceasefire-2024 to sign on to that and to share out with your friends and networks. And then also for veteran members who want to get involved and take that next step in this process, we have a letter to the editor campaign that we will happily help veterans write out these letters to the editors, supporting the ceasefire, supporting this humanitarian work. So you can contact any of our organizers across the country at organizing@commondefense.us, and we can help you figure out what local paper to put that into and help that process through. If you've never written an LTE, that is completely fine. That's what we are here to do to help. So again, if you're a veteran who is supporting a ceasefire, we would love to help get your story out on why our veteran values necessitate this work on our end.
And to jump in really quick, Jacob, to round that all out, folks, is that we want to be allies in the situation for many of reasons. One of we've seen, a lot of our membership as veterans has seen combat, have seen war, have seen, unfortunately, the atrocities of what happened. We are fighting for that not to continue somewhere else as well. Waving a really big, large, and using a blue flag and using a bullhorn to say, hey, this needs to stop. This is the reason why we're doing this, because we want to take these petitions. We want to reach Congress. We want to reach the White House. We want to let them know, hey, veterans here are becoming allies with the Palestinian folks. We want peace. People want peace, and we want to end the death. And this is why we're doing this. And this is why we're having these conversations with the other iterations with the IDF, and then here with Dr. Malas and Farah, because we want to inspire, we want to show folks that there's more here, to learn more, to be able to see what we're seeing so that we also can get the chorus louder and louder, so that we can demand a ceasefire. And all the things, all those are all the opportunities Jacob has just mentioned. If he can, I know he's working the magic keyboard there to watch the present and the teacher. You can find them on Vimeo or YouTube for the trailers. As well, he already put the ceasefire up there, as well as the one we talked about briefly. If we can put the website once again, Oceans of Injustice. That Farah has.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, because we've provided, the present, although it's also on Vimeo on demand and so forth, I think we've provided the link, and you'll have that for another 48 hours, so free of charge and all of that available. Whereas the teacher, you're going to have to wait a bit longer because that's doing film festivals at the moment. And I was just saying, I know that you attended the teacher in San Francisco International Film Festival, where we took home the Audience Award. But we just also took home the Audience Award at Brooklyn Film Festival in New York about 2 days ago. So we are just still doing film festivals. So just stay posted, because The Teacher is a 2-hour movie, and that'll be available hopefully in cinemas and so forth in the USA, but towards the end of the year.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so before I do this next banner, is it okay if I share out the password link for the present so that people can watch that? I know it's only available for like another 48 hours or so.
Well, yeah. So if you have the link for the present with the password, that's fine for now. But yes, it'll be gone in 48 hours.
Yes. So I'll put that up. Yeah. So if you go to Vimeo, yes. And this is, we were side chatting earlier. That's why I was like staring down at my phone. Oscar and I were side chatting. I was like, is it okay if I share the password publicly? I don't know. But yeah, so I think this password will work for another 48 hours. If you want to watch The Present, which is the 24-minute film that Farah put together. So Vimeo.com, and then the little short code there is 3828-67254. And then the password to watch that, I believe it's only going to be available for another 48 hours before you would have to do video on demand. But the password is there as well for anybody. Yeah. Thank y'all. And I think with that, we will end. Again, Farah, Mohanad, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your art and your resilience here with us. I am excited now to wait. I'm going to figure out how to watch The Teacher. And if it's coming to any film festivals in Minneapolis, I will make sure I go see it on the big screen.
And thank you very much for having us and for arranging this.
Absolutely. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you all, yes. And for everybody else watching, the other 2 videos, so if you caught this halfway through or want to go back to any points, they are on our YouTube and they'll live there. And the first 2 videos or discussions are also there. So the first one was, again, talking about the kind of systemic military campaigns and operations and kind of thought process with regard to Gaza specifically from one of our good friends, Amir, who works at Breaking the Silence, was a tank commander with, I forget which brigade, so I'm not going to try and lie and pretend that I know which brigade he was with. But that one's out there, and that one's also Oscar, myself, and Amir. And then last week was with one of our Palestinian friends and activists, Mohammed, who lives in Hebron, in H2. And then one of the other amazing people from Breaking the Silence, Becca, who is also an IDF soldier. So those are out there to watch. And then hopefully people will be able to watch this video or the present as well. So thank you all so much. I am ending the live stream.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.